the CEE head office in a beautiful oasis of green, Shivani and Shefali described their NGO's organizational structure, starting with the governing council that meets quarterly, led by a chairperson who is voted on by the council. The CEE Management Committee is the highest decision-making body after the governing council on management matters and has 300 members and representation from programs, administration, and finance. It became clear to us how CEE believes in its staff and in the idea that people work their best when they have freedom to dream. Following this orientation, Shefali guided us to 7 program areas to meet with the staff, and in between, we enjoyed a delicious lunch and caught sight of monkeys and peacocks. CEE was established as a National Center for Excellence in 1984. Even though CEE is supported by the Ministry of Environment and Forests, 85% of its funding has to come from other sources than the government, such as the Swedish International Development Agency, the Swiss Foundation, and corporate grants. CEE's primary objective is to improve public awareness and understanding of the environment to promote the conservation and sustainable use of nature, leading to a better environment and quality of life. Through a variety of innovative programs and educational material, CEE delivers relevant and up-to-date knowledge into the hands of teachers, NGO workers, parents, students, and community members, including landspeople and farmers. While learning about different thrust areas, of which there are 21 in total, we saw CEE's 4 main strategies come to life. The first, to inform environmental education with state-of-the-art thinking and innovation, to remain adaptable to different contexts, to build partnerships to network effectively, since communicating across levels helps to avoid duplication of efforts, and fourth, to build synergies across governments, NGOs, and CEE for overall impact.
Major challenges. Reading, for instance, not all of them are going to pick up a book and read like this. We have schools that, take the book and keep it in the library, and then they're like, what do I do next, Like, okay, you have to open the book and read it, So whenever we make resource material, we go through that challenge always that, not everybody is going to read it. But when they see these case in point examples and exhibitions, it's like, okay, this was happening, even we can do this.
CEE's major tools include partnerships, online modules on environment and conservation in line with the Millennium Development Goals, web portals, databases, and training. Environmental education was established as law in India in 1999. CEE addresses the need for trained personnel in education and action-based programs directed at the environment. CEE's focus on schools lies within their work in Paryavaran Mitra, which means friend of the environment. They impact 200,000 schools through programs such as growing vegetables, building bathrooms, and using theater in rural areas. CEE develops a great deal of materials for teacher education. They experiment with different lessons and workshops in design. CEE explores uses for the latest technologies as well, such as GIS in environment and education to support development planning, and youth-based programs to build on the knowledge that people already have. As Shivani described to us, CEE's expertise is education and communication. This was evident in their board games for children and their online Green Teacher course for distance learning for teachers. What we learned within the Children's Media Unit is that urbanization and sustainability can go together. Next, we learned that CEE provides interpretive facilities, signage, and literature for zoos across the country. They provide training for zoo staff, curators, and volunteers in English and local languages. Zoo education can make a serious contribution to a sustainable future by sharing information on biodiversity and conservation. At the design studio, we marveled at photos taken by some of India's top wildlife photographers and at the exhibit models of tigers and coral reefs. The director described what he believes are the key challenges to communicating climate change.
Like climate change, for example, something's going to happen, say about 50 years hence, and you should be worried today. Okay, so since they are futuristic, how do you make them urgent in the mind of the people?
Right.
How do you bring them from 50 years hence? How do you bring future into present? So that's one major challenge.
Yeah.
many of the things which are happening in the field of environment are not really dramatic. They happen over a period of time, and the result comes after a long time, right? Like climate change once again, or land degradation, or the wetlands just going.
Within industry initiatives, we learned how CEE works with the industrial sector to facilitate an understanding of minimizing waste as a way towards profit and growth. They speak to the business bottom line and build a bridge between industry and NGOs. CEE also works with corporates because they do have some resources and understanding of their impacts on the environment. Our day-long visit to the head office made clear how CEE values participation at each step along the way, in planning, design, execution, and evaluation. They allow programs to grow organically in tune with the heartbeat of the community. We learned that the reach is a handprint of positive action right across India and the globe. Their impact is felt at various levels, from government to schools and zoos to villages and women's groups. And their staff are truly dedicated to empowering people with knowledge, including those last in line.
Our team was led down a long alleyway to be greeted by beautiful women and their daughters. We are welcomed in through the bright purple archway and offered a seat on the spotless floor of Meena's house. Sitting on the floor, we experienced an enlightening four-way translated conversation with the village's women's self-help group about transforming lives and breaking down barriers through education. The women's self-help groups are supported by the Rural Knowledge Center. In the surrounding villages of Halvad, there are 27 women's self-help groups in 13 villages. 80% of these groups are landless. For these groups, the center facilitates education of sustainable livelihood options for socially and economically marginalized women within these villages. Activities that the women learn about and are now involved in include eco-enterprise, grain security, tool bank support such as farming resources, and financial literacy. The women described how their lives have changed by their learnings from the center and the financial security that they have worked hard to collaboratively build. Within the village we visited, to date, the women have saved 2 million rupees in their cooperative bank. The women can borrow from their bank and pay back at an interest rate of 1% within a reasonable timeline to support their family home life, such as renting farm equipment and sending their children to school. Before, families had to borrow from private lenders at 60% to 70% interest rate. We asked the women what their long-term goals were, and they all said to send their children, both boys and girls, to school. The women's self-help groups are changing lives and minds within the surrounding communities. Women in these communities are not regarded as equal participants in the family unit. The majority of women in India experience some form of abuse. Through these groups, men are understanding that women are contributing members of the family. Over time, the men have begun to understand the messages of the center. Change in women's rights and empowering women can also benefit the men in the villages. At the beginning, the Rural Knowledge Center struggled with changing men's values. To counter this, the center invited the men to attend some of the training. As well, within the villages, the meetings are rotated between houses, so the husbands are involved in and able to see what transpires at the meetings. The meetings act as sharing circles for the women, where they discuss issues in the home and villages, as well as support one another. During our visit to the village, we sipped chai with our hosts, learned lessons in breaking down barriers, heard first-hand stories of successful female empowerment, and shared moments with women who experience the same struggles as women worldwide. The context of our different cultures is what separates us, but at the same time, our struggles unite us. Nearing the end of our chat, the women asked for advice, and Renee spoke for the group.
The landmark as we approach CEE's Rural Knowledge Center? A windmill. Then an orchard comes into view, followed by a beautiful gazebo with walls of thatched, colorful, reused saris. There are flowers and gardens and birds and butterflies and an almost audible silence. After spending time in Ahmedabad's bustling city center, this peaceful sanctuary is a far cry from the noise and commotion of Indian life we have experienced thus far. Shivali tells us that 60% of people in India still live in rural areas. People in these areas are extremely vulnerable to exploitation and other issues as a result of globalization, climate change, and lack of development resources for women and education for children. This is where the work of the Rural Knowledge Center comes in, to provide the tools necessary for people to learn new skills, discover what is possible, and then take this knowledge and build on it. On our tour of the center, Samat shows us the burgeoning saplings behind the facility that they grow and provide to local schools for greening initiatives. Each demonstration site has a sign posted beside it with a detailed description of how each project works in the area's language. Every farmer comes to the center and brings a notebook so that they can write down tips and ideas to implement and experiment with on their own farm. Here, a main CEE philosophy that education and programming must be woven together to create sustainable community knowledge is very present. As we move through the site, it becomes clear that the entire center is a living, breathing, functioning example of this. During our tour of the facility, 3 things are obvious. Number 1, nothing here goes to waste. Number 2, everything serves more than one purpose. And number 3, projects are practically designed with a special attention paid to the needs of the community. Some examples are an on-site hut that has a kitchen powered by gas made from human waste and energy from solar panels. Cow dung and urine are blended together to produce fertilizer, and cow horns are stuffed with the dung and put into the ground. After a time, one horn can supply an acre of land with fertilizer. The aloe plant also serves a dual purpose. As a cactus, it requires less water, and it also increases the phosphorus in the soil. The custard apple orchard is fed through a drip irrigation system, and this type of apple was planted as it requires less water than others. The compost heap houses the worms and also creates new rich topsoil from waste. Over time, many students and farmers have visited the center to learn more about environmental sustainability. Many more will go on to learn from the center itself or from those who will pass on the valuable knowledge they have gained from various center projects.
A winding country road led us to a village school that implements CEE's environment education program for children. The sound of students' laughter filled the air and warmed our hearts. The teachers from the school receive support from the Rural Knowledge Center in Halvad, who guide them in developing field-appropriate materials and harnessing environmental education within regular curriculums. CEE places a great emphasis on joyful learning experience when children are exposed to the concepts and ideas about the environment and sustainable development. Since CEE's involvement, outdoor and interactive learning style has taken root in the school. Students are thriving in this creative and fun learning environment. The school was among the few reconstructed after the 2001 major earthquake that devastated surrounding villages. Initially, there were 5 students. Today, there are 250, in which girls slightly outnumber boys. This is a very modest school when it comes to infrastructure. But the students don't let these material challenges become barriers to their aspirations. When we asked them what they wanted to be when they grow up, the responses included doctor, engineer, teacher, among other professions. Thanks to CEE educational programming, the students are now aware of the impact of their action on natural environment. CEE's program has also instilled a civic value in students who actively participate in ministries at the school that are modeled after levels of government to focus on various concerns. we were honored to shake hands with the Minister of Sanitation. In addition, they're beginning to confront conventional beliefs about gender. Boys and girls are sharing cleaning duties. CEE has partnered with about 3,000 schools in India, and their programming reaches over 2 million students.
In the dark, through windy streets, we pulled up to a village house in Ganchiagar. We were meeting the farmers. Our group is led through a courtyard. To the left, a cow munches hay as her calf dozes off. On the right, the main room of the house is open to us. It is a 3-walled room with a kitchen on one side. There, a woman, I take to be our host's wife, is preparing chai. Slowly, farmers filter into the room as the discussion begins. We are seated in a large circle on a tarp made out of recycled cement bags. There is a relaxed, serene atmosphere. Soon the discussion starts, and the men share with us that they have learned from the Rural Knowledge Center that there are other ways of doing things, a different way of farming the land. The center offers its support to the farmers by teaching them sustainable agricultural practice. But there is a catch. They go on to describe that because of the center, they have transitioned from being receivers of information to absorbers of knowledge, and truly understanding farming at a deeper level. To them, farming was an ask your neighbor way of life. It is now a know you tool type of practice. They tell us how CEE helps them understand which fertilizers to use, what to do with agricultural waste. The center exposes them to innovative farming practices and provides opportunities to attend agricultural fairs across Gujarat. CEE further supports the establishments of a cooperative bank so that they may rent tools or buy seeds in bulk. Did they just mention seeds? Indeed, there is a catch. To ensure their livelihoods, the farmers have shunned away from food crop to concentrate their efforts on cash crop, castor and cotton. It seems to only make sense. It is their land, and the men aspire to a better life for their families. Do you save the seeds every year, I asked. Save? We buy fresh seeds every year from Monsanto. They also supply us with chemicals we need. We plant, harvest, and seed anew the following season. The farmers know they are in a dependent cycle. Although on another scale, it echoes the plight of the farmers of the Great Canadian Plains. Monsanto, 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 again and again. I tell them about the US and Mexican corn, the Argentinian soya, all cash export crop, all OGM, all Monsanto. It is a difficult conversation. They know they are caught in this infernal cycle, a cycle they do not wish for their children. The seed of knowledge has been sown, it will never be the same. They know a lot more now and are thankful for CEE and hopeful for the future. As we drive back to the oasis that make up the center, my mood is somber, my heart aches, and I am not as hopeful as they are.
Commerce has played a central role in shaping Gujarati history since 3000 BC. And amidst the shrubbery and arid climate, the salt plains of Little Rann are home to perhaps one of the most marginalized groups in the region. Salt harvesting is an 8-month-long process, and the salt plains provide 70% of India's annual consumption. Harvesting is completed throughout the hot summer months by salt pan workers, or agaria, landless young men who work and live on the scorched landscape. A single salt pan can yield anywhere between 600 to 700 tons, where the adolescent workers toil for 10 hours a day before coming to a rest. In the distance, herds of wild asses and antelope roam the desert plains in search of water. Temperatures can reach as high as 50 degrees Celsius. Diesel engine fuel is a particular burden for salt production, where rising fuel prices, coupled with ruthless private lenders, bring agrarians into inescapable bonds of servitude. A single worker earns about 150 rupee, or $3 per ton. The domestic salt market is corrupt and is dominated by a handful of traders who resell the unrefined salt for a substantial profit. To further complicate matters, the government of India mandates that iodine be added to commercial salt, a process that requires industrial refining, which is unfortunately beyond the reach for a young agrarian. Secondly, the entire expanse is deemed as a biological reserve, and the labor on behalf of these workers is considered illegal. With no legal protection, the salt workers are barely considered as people in the eyes of the government. In spite of these grim circumstances, there is hope. CEE is working with the agrarians in experimenting with alternative energy sources. In this instance, the NGO is developing a wind-powered irrigation pump which could effectively cut fuel costs and dramatically improve incomes for these young men. Furthermore, activism is rising within the local villages. Concerned individuals, led by a Gujarati entrepreneur, are petitioning the Indian government to make salt harvesting a legal practice. Hopefully, through advocacy, the agrarians will no longer be a forgotten people, but become a beacon to those who seek to advance social justice and human dignity.
Different type in windmill. In this monitoring, in this wind speed and water collect.